Hi guys, this is Lawrence Cohen, and this is the Raion Challenge the Future podcast series. The series explores startups, founders, new technology, and the investor landscape that's changing our world. I'm the CEO of Raion, which is designed for those truly passionate and dedicated towards building profitable, scalable businesses using the latest and most advanced technologies. Today on my show, I have Boris Livschutz. Boris, good to have you with us today. He has spent 3 decades, am I correct, Boris? 3 decades in Silicon Valley as a serial entrepreneur, a technologist, and more recently as an angel investor. He's been a founding member of 2 unicorn startups over the years. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. Boris, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm really happy to be here. I'm always very impressed by how many quality podcasts, you put out there. I think you're a valuable resource to all the founders out there who really, it's really hard for for them to get attention out there, and I think you're really helping them. So I think you're doing a great job, and I'm really happy to be on here.
Well, thank you. And again, we're very glad to have you on our show. So thank you for joining us. Boris, that was actually quite an interesting point you made. Like right now, we're filming like 14 podcasts every single week. So, and I kid you not, I could probably do. If I had the energy to do it, I could do 30 a week. And largely it's like tech startups. They've raised about 500,000 to about 5-6 million, so they're very, very early stage. And we're seeing some incredible early stage companies come out of the US. But they're also having a lot of like unique challenges that they probably didn't have like 2-3 years ago. So it would be great to get your take on it. I mean, in terms of the startup world, what challenges are you seeing at the moment yourself?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting part of the curve, right? Because you're seeing the formation, right, of technology and ideas, right? When you see them late stage, right, it's all about the finance and the balance sheet, right? Here you see the vision, the creativity, right? When they're built. I always love this area, and this is where I always worked, right? It's the very beginning, right? So I think it's an exciting time, but right now the market's obviously very challenging. I think there was a bubble, like I went through this 20 years ago. I went through this during COVID, where there was too much money chasing basically a static amount of good founders, right? The amount of money is very elastic.
Bubble, sorry, around like 2002, the tech bubble.
Yeah. So if you remember, like stock market peaked in March of 2000, and that's about when startups began to die. The weakest hands began to die, like pets.com and all that stuff, right? By the way, all that stuff is successful now. It just wasn't the right time, right? Too much money, right? So too much money, so money is very elastic. Wall Street, right? Especially interest rates are low, people chasing risk, but the number of quality founders and the number of engineers they can hire, or the number of brilliant sales and marketing they can hire, is not elastic. You just can't mint that in a year just because money increases, right? So you have more money chasing the same number of quality founders, and so something has to give, right? And what gives is all of it, right? You start investing in worse and worse startups. You give them more money than they need, which really hurts them. Actually, I could talk about that, right? And everything spirals downwards, right? It's a vicious downward cycle, right? So you see worse and worse founders getting funding. They compete, but their money is just as green as the next guy. They compete for the resources. You can't hire engineers, you can't hire sales guys, everything like that, right? Even lawyer. I had a lawyer I gave all my founders, to do all the creation paperwork and everything, and he went away. And every lawyer I talked to, they weren't taking new business, right? Like, how do you conduct business with no lawyers, right? So it was challenging in all regards, right? Even if you're working with the best founders, it doesn't matter, because the worst founders are eating up your resources, right? And then, if you give a founder too much money, like, what is he supposed to do with it, right? He can't just, if he sits on it, he's still got a lot of dilution, and the VCs aren't very happy. And if he spends it, he has a burn rate which is unsustainable, right? And so it's just risky. It's just bad all around. I've one company I work in Israel. They raised like over $5 million with an idea, and so they had a great vision for what version 10 will be, and I loved it. But they didn't know what version 1 is going to be. they had all this money, right? So then you got to start building a product, and you know which product to build, and it was too much money too fast. So I think all those are the challenges, right?
What happened with that company?
They're still around, but I mean, they're holding on to some money, but they still, they still don't have I mean, they're peddling around. They're trying different things, right? I mean, they're at a point where normal angel round funding would be fine. I mean, they're doing all the things that you do when you raise a few $100,000, you start building a product. But the point is that, they have VCs on the board and they have $5 million, and they're gonna, at some point they're gonna use it all up without
let's dissect this. So you're saying that one of the problems that that occurs in early stage startups is that the founder is wearing many hats, and one of those hats is being the visionary of the company. So they know what version 10 is going to be, right? They've got their big grand visions for the company, but where they slip up is in version 1. So they raise this money and they don't know how to utilize it, or it's not utilize, to use it or optimize it.
So I work with, just take a step back, I work with a lot of founders, especially on a pitch deck. And if you flip the last slide, right, I always encourage the last slide should be the vision slide. And that's where a VC can know whether he's dealing with a small-time founder, so trying to sell for 50 million, whether he's got a unicorn, potential unicorn in his hand, right? How broad, how wide, how deep is the vision? How much vision is there to this founder? Can he see the world in 10 years, right? Does he see a small idea growing into a market leader, right? So that's the vision, right? But there are 3 products you have in a pitch deck. In an early pitch deck, there are 3 products, right? The vision is one of them, right? What you're gonna have in 5-10 years. Then there's a product you have right now, if you already built something, the bits and bytes that are running right now, maybe at 2 customers, right? And then you have the roadmap. You're raising some money for the next 18 months. What are you going to build in 18 months? More immediately, right? Right. So those are 3 products, and you have to have the idea for all 3 of those, right? And that's all fine. You should have a vision from the start, right? You don't want to be a founder who just wants to build a little feature that Salesforce can, can put in as a button, right? But you have to start somewhere, right? Initially, you're just one person or a few people at a startup, and you raise, traditionally you raise a few $100,000, maybe $500,000 from angels, and a few folks go and build that, right? The thing they build, they have to be scrappy and fast and nimble, and they have to build some product they can at least get a few customers to start using, right? They still keep their vision, right? But that's all it is one slide, right? The problem is when the VC comes to them and says, "Hey, I love this. I'm gonna give you $10 million." Then what do you do, right? It messes up the whole cadence, right?
Sure. I mean, and in terms of that, so as an angel investor, how do you like to see your founders approach raising capital? Because obviously you don't want to get diluted. So say, for example, you put in, I don't know, let's just say $500,000 of your own money into an early stage. In fact, let me ask this. Would you put $500,000 of your own money into an early stage company?
So I'll just tell you a rule of thumb in Silicon Valley before the bubble, normal times, right? Check size in Silicon Valley for angels range between 25K to 100K, because less than 25K, it's just a pain to collect little checks from people, right? And sign saving agreements. Over 100K is usually institutional money, right? Those bigger checks you get from institutions. There's no point in individuals doing that. Even some big tech executive, doesn't generally write more than 100K checks, because you want, if you take any seminar about angel investing, they always tell you, right, diversify, right? You don't want to invest in one startup. They're very risky. When I feel good about startup, that means I think they have a 10 to 15% chance of success. That's great for me, right? So you can't do one. So you want to do at least 10 or 20 ideally, right? So right. So that's already a lot of money. So no, I wouldn't do $500,000.
Okay. So right, say you would do 50,000, right?
Yeah.
First of all, what percentage are you looking to take, and how are you determining what valuation the company should have?
Yeah, so if you talk to the latest crop, of investors, they're usually business school guys who have never done startups. They get really, really involved in this. We want to take this much. What's the deal flow? What the terms, etc. I don't worry so much of it. I mean, I'm aware of it. It can't be crazy, but I'm looking for unicorns. And when, I'm investing, before the bubble, you're talking about companies that range in market cap from $6 to $10 million, right? And
Right.
I'm looking, I'm trying to find one that'll be $1 billion or multi-billion dollars. So within that range, the focus isn't on squeezing extra like million out of the cap, right?
Sure.
Plus, nowadays the evolution, we've gone from notes to safe agreements, and even in there, right, you have usually a discount to the next round. So it's not worth fighting with the founder. He can go up to 12 or 50 million and have weird like dreams, but I know the next round will be a price round with a seed, and they'll bring it down to a more reasonable level, and I'll get a discount off that, so I'm protected. So it's really, honestly, it's not important. That's not where I focus, right?
So, I mean, what was I going to ask you? My mind's gone blank a sec. But that's what I was going to ask you. At what point do you make money? Right? Like again, it's very rare for an angel investor to stay in past like Series A, Series B, right? So how do you make your money back?
Well, I don't think that. Well, depends on, again, that's really two different questions, right? So staying
Sure.
involved, yes, right? They're staying involved making money, right? You mean, right? So staying involved, yeah, like the general, abstract concept is that your job is to get the guy to the next round. So a seed guy, a seed venture capitalist will want to. His goal is to get the founder to the A, and then there's someone bigger and smarter than at A, they'll take him to the B, right? Obviously that's a gross oversimplification, right? So as an angel investor, I don't have a big institution behind me or resources or anything. So like my biggest accomplishment is to help them raise a seed round when they're ready, right? And to do everything that'll get them successful to get a good seed round. After the seed round, my participation, well, any point my position will vary. I'm like an incubator. I don't have a standard plan. I help each founder according to their need. It's like a communist model, to each according to their need. Some founders need more help than others. Some founders need more help from the things I can help versus other things, right? But generally when there is a seed, there's a professional VC, maybe even a board seat, whatever. So there's less help like needed for me. I mean, I still participate, but less. I mean, my help is needed less. And then when they get an A round, I try to keep in touch with them, and if they're hiring off, help them a little bit with the recruiting here and there, anywhere of connections. But it drops and drops and drops, right? But doesn't mean I make money, right? So I've been offered like my best founder, at Series B, he raised like 50 million in the bubble. He wanted to clean up the cap table, and he offered me like a 10x return. And I said, no, like, you're my unicorn. Are you kidding me? Like, you're my horsey. I want to build my reputation on you. I'm not selling for 10x, right? So I've had offers, but no, I mean, I make money the same way the VCs make money at the very, very end. So this is a long game. People during the bubble get into these quick money. There's no quick money, right?
And your unicorn, right? Or potential unicorn. What is it about that company that you're seeing that is unique? Why is that the one that's going to be a $1 billion company?
People ask me this, there's no like math formula. It's like, how do you pick a unicorn founder or potential unicorn founder? There's a feel to them. I mean, they feel different, right? They have, first of all, like I mentioned, they have a broad vision, right? Right. They want to conquer the world. They want to build a product and sell it, right? They want to conquer the world, right? I mean, second thing, they're very nimble, very aggressive, right? Like, and they're very, I mean, nothing gets them, right? Any problems they resolve, right? Like, they're not scared of anything, right? And you can watch them and work, right? And see them jump the hurdles. They're working on their first customer. It's not closing. It's not going to close, whatever. They find the second customer and they close that one, right? And they go back to the first one. They find workarounds for everything. They're just scrappy as heck, right? And they never give up. And they're either going to become a unicorn or die trying, right? So it's that persistence, that energy, the vision.
I don't believe you've ever come across a founder that has even 1% of the resilience and ability in terms of us when it comes to overcoming problems. Like I kid you not, everyone and Americans, I'm going to pull you up on this. Americans always talk about these scrappy founders, they can overcome any problems. Most of them are from rich families, right? Most of them aren't going to end up like sleeping in their car. That's the reality of it. So when you say like resilience, like how resilient are we talking? Because
Yeah, most of my founders, like, well, first they're not even American. We're
right,
talking like Chinese, Indian, Russian, whatever. And
right,
second of all, yeah, they're definitely not from rich families. I actually did invest in one from a very, a big line of, manufacturing family. But I invested because, he was hungry. He didn't want to live off a trust fund. He was hungry and he was smart and savvy and everything, right? So, rules, there's a rule of thumb and then there's exceptions to the rule, right? So,
there's always exceptions to the rule, that's for
yeah.
sure.
But you're right. You're right. The typical American. During the bubble, there was so many like new seed funds. All these MBA kids who have access to some money. Families can raise a $20 million fund, and they have nothing. They have nothing to offer this world.
They don't know what it is to be like to go out there and be scrappy, and and I hope you don't mind me saying that. Look, obviously, you can't tar everyone with the same brush, right? You get your good and your bad everywhere, but I've just been interviewing a lot of like investors in the US at the moment, and they talk about these founders like they're the David taking on Goliath, like, and that they're these tough guys. But they're not, like, and I mean it in the nicest way possible. But like, it doesn't mean they're not going to build multi-billion-dollar companies. But the truth is, when they hit a hurdle, most of them quit.
Well, the problem is the market has changed. I started, just to date myself, I graduated from college in the 90s and I went to Berkeley. I did, computer science. So I was around people, who should know the space very well. And when I was graduating, I told my friends that, in the computer science program, I was going to a startup and they thought I was crazy. Startup, like no pension, there's no 401k vesting period, whatever. They said, you're crazy, right? It was a very unique like group of people that did this crazy thing. It wasn't for everyone. And now I feel like it's become everyone. Like everyone I know, their wife is building some app or something. So what you're seeing is very different than where I grew up, right? Right.
Yeah. I think in terms of how do I differentiate a good founder from a bad founder, I definitely think that they listen, right? I really do, and I think that it's like the whole like Steve Jobs what's the word, like legend, right, in terms of like going around shouting at people, bossing people about, like, I think that's largely bullshit. And I'm not saying that he didn't do that.
Well, you're seeing them much later on than when they were the seed round.
Right, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. But again, in terms of it, I think that naturally, in order to get past the seed round and get your Apple One, to market, you've got to be listening to other people. You've got to be, and I think that what I'm seeing right now, particularly out of the West Coast, is a lot of very young, very confident founders with zero sales.
Yeah, well, because the money's there, right? You can fund, right? I think in a few years this will resolve itself. It's already beginning to. The weak are dying. I tell my founder, there's mainly only one way your startup can fail, and that's to run out of money. And when there's money growing trees, you can't fail, right? By definition, right? Now they're failing. Now the VCs are pulling back, and slowly, I think it'll take a few years. I think it'll clean itself out, and the strong will thrive. I tell my founders now that it's no longer about winning; it's about surviving. Surviving is winning in the next like 2-3 years.
Let me ask you this: like, what do you think we're doing wrong? And again, I love to like pull investors up on this. So we've built a community. We got 20,000 subscribers, 12,000 users. We've got 23 paying clients, right? What else have we got? Yeah, we've got the whole company we built on about $300 a month. Right, our marketing we spend about $20 a month on, which I think that's now gone up to about $30 or $40. We get about 40 to 50 signups per day. and we have had Microsoft, IBM, Accenture, Brevin Howard, SumUp, University of Oxford. They all speak at our events. They're all on our podcasts and so forth. And we partner with university with some of the top 10 universities in the world, but investors look at us and they're like, "This is high risk." Like, what is it do you think that as a founder I could be doing better that would make investing in Raion more attractive? Because
Well, look, if an investor says, if an investor says high risk, you're probably talking to the wrong investor, because this is investing in any startup is high risk. Investing in an early stage startup is extremely high risk, right? So this is, again, like the last 10 years, the bubble, everything. You've gotten the wrong investors who think this is like a 13% IRR yearly return business. It's not, right? It's extremely high risk. You have to take on high risk, and you have to know what you're doing, right? You have to do it well, and you have to be able to add value. The problem, right? Like all these investors, even if they invest, they have no value to add. They're just money people. They spread money around, right? So I would recommend identifying, right, who are the people who are the useful VCs who understand your space. You're in kind of a marketplace of matchmaking investors with startups, blah blah, right? So you have to identify the right. I think a lot of founders just do a shotgun approach. Like, I had a founder who scraped Crunchbase and pulled out 2,000 seed funds. Like, most of those won't lead. Nowadays, because you got business school kids who don't know what they're doing, they can't lead around. They don't know what's invested, so they're followers, right? They wait for someone savvy to invest, and then they want to like jump in and stick their money in there, like a mutual fund, right? So you have to identify who's leading, who actually will lead around, because once you find a lead, it's easy to find followers. And you have to identify who understands what you're doing, and who'll be your partner in that, because they really have to believe in what you're doing, right? It is really risky. It's really early stage. They have to agree with your vision, right?
I think for the most part, a lot of them can't believe what we've done on $300 a month.
Yeah.
They think that I'm bullshitting them.
Well, that's easy in the data room. There's due diligence. That's not a problem. But yeah, the question is like whether you should be spending that little money is different, right? But
yeah,
because imagine what you could do with $3,000 or $30,000, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
There can be like disagreement on the future, but
$30,000. I bet I could run this company for 6 months.
Yeah, so this is something too. The money.
That could be a mistake, right? That could also slow us down in the traction. We might be better off,
It depends. It's always ROI. Like, what's the value of the extra dollar, right? And how much dollars do you have in the bank, right? So right now, like I said, everyone's advising their founders to keep money in the bank. Right now, it's a hard time, right? So part of it, if you're raising now, it's gotten harder, right? Right. So, but you have to really, I think the seed round, I think, is the hardest round of them all, because angel round is kind of friends and family. It's people. There's not much product or traction, whatever. People are investing in the founder, in you. Either they know you or they love the space or whatever, right? And once you get to Series A, there's like, any space, you can identify like 12 partners who repeatedly build unicorns. You either get them or you don't. We're talking like the benchmarks, the Gray, like the Sequoia, right? You know exactly who to reach out to. But seed funds, there's thousands of them just in America. I don't know how many are in Europe, right? And
most of them are Ponzi schemes in Europe.
They're in the minor leagues, right? Obviously, if they were really good, they'd be at Sequoia, but they're not, right? There are a few in America that are exceptions. They want to be there and they're really good, but for the most, like 98% of them are minor league players at best, right? And so it is hard to navigate. There's a lot of noise and a lot of people, and right? So it is the hardest round of them all, honestly. You just have to filter them out, right?
I actually think in the UK, most early stage investors, they're just like, I could be wrong, just my opinion, but I think a lot of them are just like money laundering exercises. Like, I've seen so much money go into such dog shit companies. Like, you just think there's no way.
What's their choice? Look, they're not paid to hoard money. If they have $100 million fund, they have to deploy it, right? That's what they're paid for.
You wouldn't invest. Like I saw one. I've got to be careful what I say. I'm not going to say it because it
You
was
could bleep out the name like they
yeah,
do
yeah,
now.
exactly. But in terms of that, like in the UK, I'm not talking about the US. In the UK, money goes like from government friends, politicians to people that they're like associated with. In the US, to be fair, you guys champion each other's success. You want to see other founders do well. You want to make money together.
Well, I think it's an older business, and America is generally more entrepreneurial. I think, I've been working with one founding team in London. So it's my first time, going across the pond. And I was listening to their calls with VCs, and I did find, I mean, beyond just the quality being lower, I don't want to say that much, but they're more risk averse, and they're less.
Sorry, I need to. I'm sorry to use that word, but they're wimps. In the European VCs are not real VCs. I might have to bleep out that word, but they're not real VCs. A VC, like you were saying, is someone that actually they take the risk. With the European and the UK VCs, they want to come in at the last second, right?
Well, they don't have the risk appetite. I mean, just the cultures are different and the history is different. They're not as the industry of investing in startups is not as mature as in America, and the culture is not a risk-taking culture as much as America. And so, yeah, like there are some intelligent people I've seen them, right? But they want to invest in very well-treaded spaces, right? So if you're building like CRM 3.0, they love that, right? Because they get it. The risk is just an execution, right? They don't do well in vision risk, like you're opening up a new category, right? Or you're deviating from the very, and there are thousands of pitch decks now of products on top of Salesforce, right? Improving lead gen, improving opportunity tracking, whatever, right? That they love because right? Like they get it. There's not much left in imagination. Once you get into the world of imagination and new things, yeah, that's not for Europe, right? But so I wouldn't say they're bad. I think even the good ones are good within a certain in their swim lane, right? And they don't like it's hard for them to. And the problem is the traditional purpose of startups is to innovate, but these VCs are not the right partners for innovation.
So I mean, if you were a founder, how would you determine the right partner for your startup? So for example, there's thousands of accelerator programs. They all have fairly similar, right? They have fairly similar terms, but some have more aggressive terms than others. Some offer more.
So are you saying how do you find the right investor or the right accelerator or incubator?
I'm going to say accelerator. Yeah, I was saying accelerator because again, I'm not going to name drop, but I speak to loads of founders that come out of one very, very well-known accelerator, and I don't get it because the accelerator, from the outside perspective, it looks like incredible. It looks like you would just be primed for sales, right, over a 3-month period. And yet when I speak to the founders from that accelerator, none of them care about sales. It's just not a priority for them. They're too confident.
Well, I mean, I work with one in San Francisco. I think is the best B2B accelerator. But I mean, I work with ones I know. But the job of at the end of the day, the job of what I call incubator accelerator, right, is to provide education and resource and coaching and resources, right, to the class, right, to the founders, right. I mean, right, they almost never provide enough money to be really useful or zero money at all, and that's fine, right? And before COVID, they also provide co-working space, whatever. But the main purpose is coaching, right? I mean the same thing advisors do, right? They should be your trusted advisor. I think of it, and incubator I work with, they give you like 50 grand. They take back 25 grand in tuition. And tuition is a good thing of because they're like university, right? They educate the founders and make them go out into the world.
That's not so bad if the value's there, right?
Yeah. So I mean, think of a university. Universities help you find a job when they're all done. I mean, they enlighten you and then they help you find a job, right? And here's the same thing. Like they should have a demo day. They should be connected with the best seed funds, right? Because that's the next step. They should. So the best ones I think have people. So there's one investment person helps you find angels, helps you find seed. There's one like a sales coach helps you understand your especially if you're a tech founder, right? You've never done a PO. There's someone on that side of the game to help you with that. And then there's someone like a CEO coach to teach you how to how to be a founder / you're a CEO by default. Most people have never been a CEO before, right? So if people to guide you on strategy of how to build a successful startup, how to close your first deal, how to find investor, all those things they should be working on, right? And you just have to evaluate whether they're really doing that or whether, I mean, I've seen some that are literally just co-working spaces and they call themselves, right? So, you have to dig in there and see, I mean, you can ask, like always ask for reference.
Have you got a favorite accelerator? Is there one that you look at and you go, actually, that's really
good?
I
guess in a positive way I can mention, I work with Alchemist a lot. I work with actually a founder I'd invested in. He got in and dragged me in. I work with Alchemist. I think they're the best B2B I don't know if they're incubator accelerator in San Francisco. I mean that's where they physically are. I've been working with them since 2018-ish. So they have a vault where people like me, the founders can, there's probably 1,000 people in the vault, and it lists all my specialties, expertise, whatever, and they can contact me for two reasons. Either one, they're looking for angel investors, or B, they're looking for advice, right? Oh. Right. So I help out there. And then, they provide the founders with a CEO coach, a goals coach, and a sales coach. So it can be like one of my guys had the CEO of DocuSign, right, as their CEO coach. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? So they're hooked into the ecosystem, and all the top like seed funds, they go to demo day, they're well connected.
How much
with
do they invest initially? Sorry, did you say?
Sorry?
How much do they invest initially?
I don't know now. I mean, back in the day, I think they gave you like 50K and they took half it back in tuition. So, the investment portion is never very interesting. That's not the real purpose. It's not enough to move the needle, right? Sure. It's enough for them to get some equity, because this is like how they get, like I live here in Florida now, and like in Tampa, all the incubators are not for profit, which makes no sense, because you're taking government money to help make young founders into billionaires, right? I don't think that's a very good social good. I mean, it helps Tampa a little bit, but what that means is everyone's on salary, so it limits like what kind of employees you can get, etc., what kind of advisors. Whereas like in Silicon Valley, you can offer everyone a carry, right? And the way you can offer them, percentage. So if someone becomes a unicorn, like everyone, all the advisors, all the employees make some money at the incubator, right? So you can attract higher talent, right? And so, that's why they have to invest to get the money, right? So it's, you can't, again, I'm not an expert on all this, but you never join one for the money, right? I mean, some of them don't invest and they charge you money, which is, another model, whatever, right? But I think the important thing, it takes up, you get as much as you put in. You should be there. Now that COVID's over, like at Alchemist, they cross-pollinate, this back over COVID, like everyone, at least one founder, like, they invest in people in Japan and Russia and wherever, but one founder like had to come for a few months and be around so they can meet other founders, collaborate with them, and all of you have the same problems, right? And they had social events and everything, and so you could really like meet people like me and people like you.
So let me ask your opinion on something, because I think you're on an interesting point, right? That when you meet people, there's just far more opportunity, right? Jan and I were discussing this, and we were saying maybe I should just go out. I should spend like a month in California, in Silicon Valley, just meeting investors, right? And networking. I mean, is it that straightforward in terms of like once you've got traction on your product and once you've actually proven you've got the product market fit, is it very much then just about building those personal relationships? Because I think that, again, when you talk about the education, when you talk about like every path that a founder would take towards investment at angel stage or at pre-seed stage, it really just comes down to who you know. Or have I misunderstood that?
Well, those are two separations. I mean, building a relationship, personal relationship, is always in any business highly valuable. If you really look at the big boys, the Series A, B, C, or Sequoias, whatever, in Silicon Valley, like most of the founders I know who got funding were personally like introduced to a partner. It wasn't some lead gen thing. They didn't just email, right? Like they had a professor at Stanford who knew the guy, or another founder or something, right? Because otherwise, it's just, they get thousands of pitch decks a week probably, right? So relationships are always important, right? Now, whether I get this question a lot, I've gotten from London, but I also get here like in Tampa, right? Is it worth for me to spend a few weeks in Silicon Valley walking around, whatever, meeting investors, blah, blah, blah? And that's trickier, right? Because if you don't know anyone there, then no. I mean, what's the like 3 weeks? I mean, you can do on Zoom, you can do in person, doesn't matter. They're just random investors, right? If you already have some connection, or you have someone there, like I don't know, a friend who is an investor, or a friend, or a few founders you work with.
Sorry, apologies. I didn't give enough context. I don't mean like literally turn up and walk around the streets. I mean just like we know loads of companies in Silicon Valley. Like I could set 30 meetings there within like probably a day or a day and a half. I could fill up meetings all day, every day.
Well, it's not been filling up, but I personally, like in COVID, there's been a big debate, right? But I personally believe, yeah, like personal connection in Silicon Valley, being able to run down across the street and meet a VC for coffee, or meet a founder for coffee, is hugely valuable, right? Right. And you miss that when you're not in Silicon Valley. And right now with this AI, whole generative AI craziness, right? People are moving back to Silicon Valley because I mean, not for investment networking, but for engineers are all collaborating, trying to figure out, right? There's a big innovation cycle, right? And it's all there because it's so much easier, right? Like you'll take the train, everyone's talking about something tech, right? You'll go in a coffee shop and you see the founder of this or founder of that, right? You meet people, right? So yes, I think it's highly valuable to be around, but you have to already kind of have some connection there. If you're a stranger and you're just there, you can schedule some meetings, but it's not that much better than Zoom. I think if you already have some relationships, it's great to cement them by going there and seeing the investor in person, or seeing people in person. Yeah, I think I mean, it can't hurt, but the value you get can really range depending on how you do it, right?
Sure. And I mean, and in terms of like advice, right? In fact, no, let's not go to advice just yet. But in terms of success, what's the biggest success you've experienced in terms of investing?
I've reinvented myself a few times. I used to be, geeky engineer. Then I was, a guy on the business side working with customers, and now trying the latest, reinvention of being an investor, right? So I've only been doing this 5-6 years, right? So it's very early. So like I said, I have a bell curve of I've invested like in 15 founders, and I have a bell curve. Like some are dying, some are really successful, like past Series B. In between, I mean, right? But luckily, like I haven't had an exit early on. Exit would mean an early exit, right? Like someone has to sell fast, right?
Yeah.
So it's still, that's a problem. It's really hard being an angel investor because you don't have this like a mutual fund, like a quarterly track record. Like you can't prove you know what you're doing until like 10 years or something, right? In the meantime, yeah, and the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to die, right? The startups die faster than the ones that succeed, because you can die, you can run out of money in 2 years, but you're not going to be a unicorn for 10 years, right? So you really have to have a lot of confidence.
How do you feel about that, though? Sorry to pull you back somewhat, but how do you feel about that? So, you've put 50, 100 grand of your own money into a company, and then 2 years later, gone.
I mean, you have to know what game you're in. As long as you acknowledge that, as long as in advance you said, okay, I'm going to do this, and I know like I'm going to lose, I expect that most of the startups will die. Like I said, if I can get 10 to 15% odds, right, I consider that a good investment, right? So by that definition, you gotta expect most of them will die. And people always ask me like, which ones do you think are the best? And I say, it's like my children. I don't try to like have favorites, right? But at this point, they've spread out on the curve, I can kind of like, there's ones in the middle I don't know which way they'll go, but the ones in the edges I kind of know which ones that, right? And I try to help them all as much as I can, but if they die, they die. And it's still a relationship I have with the founder, and maybe he'll start another one, maybe I'll invest again, right? You die for different reasons.
You would. So an investor a company that you've invested in, the founder has lost your money, depending on why and what they've learned and so forth, you still see value in them and as potential to invest again in.
Well, don't forget what happens once they die. Like the person doesn't die, right? Like the business dies. The person will go on. I have one founder working at Google. He's in charge of a whole product line over here, right? So, they're still very, very, very useful contact and good people to have a relationship with, right? And depending on why they died, maybe I wouldn't invest. Maybe I wouldn't. Like some founders I just realized I was wrong. They're not unicorn type founders. They're not the kind of founders to invest in. But in some cases, it just wrong time, wrong. There's different reasons you die, right?
We had an investor put like 150 grand into our last company, and within a year the money was gone. It was a complete disaster, and I've got to be honest, it was more them. They were so confident in what we were doing. They had another business. They had been like hugely successful. Well, I mean, at the time, it appeared that they'd been hugely successful. And we probably listened to them too much. There was too much respect. There was too much gratitude in terms of, thank you for supporting us. Thank you for trusting us, yada, yada. And within 12 months, the money was gone. And so were they. They just walked away.
Well, it honestly, like the one thing I've been impressed is all my founders have died. I mean, all the startups have died. The founder has been more worried about losing my money than I was, right?
Yeah,
like they feel a fiduciary duty, right? And they returned whatever they could, whatever was left, right? So I've never had a case where it was fraudulent or intentional, right? They fought to the last day, and they fought a good fight, and they died in a blaze of glory, and that's all I can ask, right? Like it's not personal,
Well, no, I get it. I have to say that we fought. Like to say that we fought to survive is an understatement. The irony is that actually had they stayed on board, had we stuck together, the whole team besides the investor, we all still work together, all of us. So and I think now we've kind of finally, after 7 years, we've actually got it right. Which sounds crazy, right? 7 years sounds horrendous.
No, some people look. I mean, the history of before Silicon Valley. Everyone knew that mainstream business, it would take like 3 or 4 failures before a guy or a lady figured out the right company, right? It's legendary. A lot of people, who famously started some big company, they failed 3 or 4 times before that, right? So failure isn't bad per se, as long as it's in the right context, right?
Well, no, and I said that to Jan recently. I was like, do you know what's great about us? I said we don't repeat mistakes. That's one good thing that's good about us. We don't repeat mistakes. But yeah, I mean, 3 or 4 failures sounds incredible. I would take that. We've had a few more than that. But look,
some people are very entrepreneurial, but they need to evolve their maturity and business understanding, right? They got the entrepreneurship right, but they have the business side wrong, and just eventually it hits, right? It hits, right?
And I think what I got wrong was how fast it would take to generate sales, right? You think you're going to generate sales, and then it's like, what do you do when you don't generate the sales you expected? What happens when the software breaks again and again and again and again? And that's interesting about tech startups, right? It's almost like a guarantee that your product is not going to work the first few times.
Yeah, this is the difference. Like I work with tech founders who know all that, right? I mean, they've been through companies, so they know how software ships and is sold and is built and everything. And others I work with, like graduates of business school, the guys from business side, right? Like there I have to work on a lot more understanding that software has bugs and software is unpredictable. It's not like marketing where there's exact marketing plan, there's exact deadlines. Like in the world of engineering, it's all chaos, right? And they have a hard time handling that, right?
Yeah.
And tech founders have a hard time understanding like sales, like why a deal won't close, or right. So depending on that's why I think each founder is so unique. I work with them in different ways. But yeah, they need help. And the best founders, I have a bell curve of how much founders listen to me and how much they take my help or they need my help, right? And so some listen, some don't, and I'm okay with that, right? Like some have other advisors. I mean, some already know a lot of things, right? But yeah, I think this is where a first-time founder or founder who hasn't been around for 30 years in the Valley, should really have good advisors. It's okay if you don't know everything, right? No one knows everything, but you have to plug those holes. If you think you know everything, then you're in big trouble, unless you really do know everything, right? This is where most of my founders get in trouble when they don't listen and they go off and they they think they know what they're doing and they don't, right?
Okay, completely.
But by nature, you were talking about this, like founders listening. This is a problem. I mean, so if you talk to your average old time VC, they'll tell you the sweet spot is someone who's 30 years old, right? And and they're crazy, but they're manageable crazy, right? Because normal person, down the street, your neighbor isn't going to say, oh, I'll just, I'll grab a few guys or I'll grab a few engineers, I'll raise a little bit of money and I'll take on Microsoft or whatever. How hard? I mean, it's easy, right? I'll destroy Microsoft, right? Like normal people, don't say that, right? It's crazy. So you have to be crazy to want to do this. I mean, the right time founder can get crazy, but it has to be in a controlled crazy, so the VC can manage that process, right?
Yeah. Honestly,
so they're gonna be wild bulls, and my best of founders, they're hard to ride. Like it's not like you just sit down with a nice person, have some coffee, and they're just listening to you. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah.
You have to sit them down and say, hey, like I know you think you know everything, and I know you think.
But you know what? Most people live such boring lives. Like someone said to me once, I hope you're not planning on competing with Microsoft. And I was like, I hope I am,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, it's crazy. Like think about just what you're saying.
Yeah, but you say that, but it's the reality is that they're just people. And the thing is, and I'm not talking about Microsoft here, but the reality is when you look at like a lot of like big companies, they might have hundreds of thousands of employees, but how many of them truly care about the success of that company? When you go to a startup and there's 5-10 people there, every single person, all of them care about
but
that.
Look, it's still all right. It's still the odds are against you. It's still hard. Like Microsoft doesn't need every employee to work hard, right? It just needs more than you have, right? Right? So I mean, it's not rational. Look, I mean, rationally, like people are right. Like this is, it's not the easiest way to make a living, right?
No. Listen, I said to Jan that one thing I do regret. I said to Jan, we should have just done something far easier, made a shit ton of cash early on, and then done this.
I used to have a founder. He used to say, "If it's easy, why do it?" Like,
but I agree with that. Like there's a great line in the book. Have you ever read? Not that this is a good testament, but have you ever read The Smartest Guys in the Room, the Enron story?
I've heard of it. No, I haven't. Yeah. So, I deal with the smartest guy in the room all the time. So, yeah.
Right. But I'm saying that, well, they definitely weren't the smartest guys in the room, but
well, exactly, right. Anyone who thinks they're the smartest guy in the room probably isn't, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, or they're just in a very stupid room. But yeah. I mean, like that's Anyway, but I was going to say that there's a really good line in it where one of the characters says, like life isn't about being happy. And I think that's so true. Like life is not about being happy. I think more than anything, it's about being useful and doing something extraordinary.
Well, I think happiness comes from that. I mean, some people are happy by doing incredibly hard things, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, I would never invest in a founder who's purely in it for the money, right? Because that's hard. If you just want money, this is a long journey, and there are easier ways to make money. Absolutely, right?
But I mean, to be fair, I think most founders, it's very hard to make a company successful if your motivation is the money, because at some point you're going to get hit with a crisis and then another crisis and another crisis. And if you're doing it because you want to go and make hundreds of billions of dollars, you're going to quit. You're going to give up, and I think that for the most part, there has to be more to it. There has to be a meaning behind why you're doing it. Like with us, right? So with Raion, it's to protect the future of the jobs market. You know, when I when I first went to IBM like 7 years ago, it was, we're gonna see a massive brain drain. We're gonna see that people aren't gonna have jobs and so forth. And it was very much with the philosophy that you have to create millions of new companies that will in turn create millions of new jobs. At the time, it seemed crazy, but now that doesn't seem so crazy, right?
I think it's a fusion. I mean, if someone says that they're not just in money, I also don't believe them. But I think there has to be a combination of something beyond that. And I see like tech founders, it's usually the accomplishment. Like they say, I can build this better, right? Or I can do this better. I can bring a new technology light. And for business guys, it's the hunger of business kind of success and
Hold up,
outmaneuvering a bigger company, or that kind of thing, right?
money. Sorry, I should caveat what I was saying. I do believe that money is like a central, not the, but a central motivation behind it, right? Because we all want to live like better lives.
Well, otherwise, employees, why give them stock options? Right?
Yeah.
Then stock options won't hold them. The whole point of stock options is to hold on to them for a long time.
Sure.
And if you don't care about money, then you don't care about stock options, right? That's all all stock options are is future money, right? So yeah, I mean, you have to value the money, but you have to have a bigger goal along with that, right? So yeah, I mean, founders have very different ideas, but most of them like want to succeed. That's the biggest thing. They want to show the world, they want to make their mark in the world, that they're not just average, right? They can go and be an employee and make a lot of money on salary, but that's not their motivation, right?
Agreed. Boris, we're going to leave it there, but thank you very, very much for your time. It's been a really interesting discussion. And yeah, I hope you're able to attend other like Raion founder stories, Raion investor stories. I think you were, particularly popular with the
Sure.
founder. So thank you.
Just send me calendar invites.
Absolutely will do. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks.